Gaudete, gaudete, Christus es natus, ex Maria Virgine gaudete.
Hello and welcome to Rediscovery Channel. This is a channel where we basically talk about anything in history, and we cover all sorts of subjects. We cover, everything, from beginning of time. We cover a lot of historical events and people that are relevant to today's society, and what we feel is definitely something very applicable in our lives. So I'm here with Ivor Kovac and also Stilgar, and this is the Great Pharaoh, and we are all here today, and a couple of us will be discussing our topic. So Ivor Kovac and Stilgar, we welcome you. Hey guys, we're all together here, and I wanted to start with our topic today of actually a saint, story. It's basically Saint Pantaleon. This saint was actually a saint in the 3rd century, and he was actually a physician. He was born to pagan father and a Christian mother, and he became a physician, and he was highly respected in society. He became the physician for an emperor at the time, in the 3rd century. It's an emperor called Emperor Maximilian, and then later he came to Christ. He believed in Christ. He believed that there was something beyond scientific knowledge and application for healing diseases. He believed in the divine, and that the church and Christ were the primary healers. And he had later become a martyr for the faith. So we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so we'll go ahead and we get started here in the 3rd century in 275 AD. Saint Pantaleon was born in an ancient Greek city, which later became the capital, eastern capital city of the Roman Empire, and the city was called Nicomedia. And he basically was born in 275 AD to a pagan father and a Christian mother. His father was Eustergius, and his mother was named Saint Eubula. His mother was considered a saint later on. I don't know much about her story, but she was the one that raised him in the Christian faith. And his father was very wealthy. His family was very wealthy. They had slaves at the time. They had access to the best schools, best education, best health care, everything at the time. So he basically lost his mother at a young age. He was raised as a Christian. His mother taught him the Christian faith, and eventually, because she had passed away, he kind of got away from the faith. He was kind of more on the pagan side, believed in multiple gods and so on and so forth. So
the Greek gods, right? You think?
Yeah, Greek gods, multiple gods. That's what pagans just believe in multiple gods. They're all kind of, some are greater than others. There's not this, the one true God as Christians, as all Christians believe, the Trinity. So basically, he after he lost his mother, he kind of got away from the faith, and he went to go study medicine at by a very renowned physician, Euphrosinos, and he was also a pagan, and actually tried to. They allowed him to become the physician to the Emperor Galerius, and so he was basically won back to Christianity by another saint. His name was Saint Hermalius. He was a bishop of the Church of Nicomedia, and he convinced him that Christ was the better physician, signaling the significance of the exemplum of Pantaleon, that faith is to be trusted over medical advice. So what ended up happening was he grew in the Christian faith, and I'm not sure if he was I know he was the physician for Emperor Maximian. I don't know about this Galerius. I heard that I think Euphoricinos was the physician for Galerius, and then he became the physician for Maximian. Yeah,
I
Maxim.
got a question.
Sure.
How was he? Do you know what it was that convinced him to turn to Christianity?
Yeah, I think reading about his life through different resources, I didn't cover all the points. So one of the points, I think there was an event where a child was bitten by a snake, and he got poisoned. And it was one of those like emergency type of scenarios where he gets to the child, and the snake is still there alive. And I think while he was being convinced by Saint Hermalis about Christianity, I think he asked God for a miracle. I think he basically pleaded to God, potentially, right? So he's like, okay, God, if you exist, if you will heal this child of his poison, remove this poison and heal this child, and also kill this snake, I'll believe in you, and that'll be that. I'll put it to rest. I'll never question the Christian faith again, and I will basically continue the Christian faith the way my mother raised me when I was young. So he ended up getting the miracle. The child recovered from the poison bite. I guess he gained consciousness, or basically the poison was gone. He was completely healed of his wound, of the bite, and the snake ended up dying. So that was the sign right there for Pantaleon. That was enough for him to believe in Christ. And from that point, he was very fervent, and he realized there's a nice quote from Saint Alphonsus Liguori. He said that he studied medicine, Saint Pantaleon studied medicine with such success that the Emperor Maximilian appointed him his physician. One day, as our saint was discoursing with a holy priest named Hermalius, the latter, after praising the study of medicine, concluded thus: "But, my friend, of what use are all thy acquirements of this art, since thou art ignorant of the science of salvation?" So, in other words, he was basically telling him, what's the point of trying to master healing people's bodies, the physical self, the body, right? If you don't understand who's actually the physician of the soul, right? So, and traditionally, obviously there's numerous verses that talk about, how the flesh is limited, right? Like the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Yeah.
That the flesh is, you cannot please God in the flesh, only please God in the spirit, so on and so forth. So it'd be equivalent to him saying, what's the point of trying to heal somebody of supposedly these, whatever mental condition he has, but you're not really treating his, the root causes of it. You're sort of just putting a patch on things and a band-aid on things, and so on and so forth. So the soul is separate from the body. I mean, we see this constantly. As a people of faith, we understand very clearly that all of what we accomplish is we accomplish so much more through spiritual works, and the physical is very limited. What the physical can actually do for us, both work together, but that's the idea, that there is a soul, and the physician of souls is Christ. So that was basically the main point right there. And so what happened was, there was another miracle that happened. There was a blind man um, that came to Saint Pantaleon at the time. They said that he was, a healer, a very good physician. Maybe at some point when he acquired his faith, maybe at this point they would say, like, go to this doctor. He's a holy man. I'm not sure if he began becoming a saint at that point, but what I do know is that he healed the blind man. He allowed the blind man to restore his sight, as a way to convince his father, or he used it as an opportunity for his father to also believe in the faith. So when he healed the blind man, his father also ended up believing and left the pagan faith. So what happened was his father passed away. He acquired a large fortune. He freed all his father's slaves. He distributed all his wealth to the poor, and he developed a great reputation in Nicomedia. So obviously, you start to gain, as a godly man, you start to gain sort of that power, that authority. You start to become very large, and that's what he was becoming in this in Nicomedia. So there were envious colleagues. He got very big, and very very big spirit, very powerful spirit, and there was many of his colleagues were jealous of him. And I think during the Diocletian persecution, the Emperor Maximilian wanted to save him and not get caught up, getting in trouble and becoming persecuted for his faith. So he tried to convince him to come back to the pagan faith, to deny Christ, and to believe in the gods that the Diocletian, the Romans, believed in. So as many martyrs before him and many martyrs after him, the answer was no, as usual. He would not. He said, "You can take my body, but you cannot have my soul." He did not. He was willing to give that away, to live on the earth, but he would not give them his soul. So he denied it. And I think what ended up happening was, they tried to give him some sort of a proposition. The emperor had a number of physicians, pagan physicians, and they brought a paralytic man, to the emperor's courts, whatever, and they had Saint Pantaleon there as well. They said, "Okay, look, whoever can heal this paralyzed man, we'll believe in your God. If you can heal him, if our gods can heal him, then you have to come back to the pagan faith, or we're going to kill you." So what ended up happening was the pagan physicians could not heal this paralytic. Obviously it was, I don't know, back in the day what magics they were using, but it was just all a scam. Like, they couldn't heal the guy. Traditionally, we believe as Orthodox and as Catholics, we believe that the Lord did not permit those physicians to heal the paralyzed man. But Saint Pantaleon, he did heal the paralyzed man. The man got up and walked, and he was able to walk just fine. And they couldn't deny that he had healed him, because it was very known around in Nicomedia, this man was a paralytic from his whole life, right? So they couldn't deny it, but they did say that he was using black magic, and this could not have been from God. This was a dark magic, a dark energy. So they ended up persecuting him anyways. So they try to use torches to burn him to death. And in the beginning, when they were attempting to kill him, a lot of miracles were happening. God was delivering him from everything. So the torches ended up becoming extinguished when they tried to burn him. They tried to put him in a bath of molten lead, prepared for him. Actually, Christ had appeared. He stepped into the cauldron with him, and the fire went out, and the lead became cold. He was also thrown into a sea with a large stone tied around him, and he was thrown to the sea, but the stone ended up floating. So he was obviously delivered. It was almost like a floating device, actually. He was also thrown to wild beasts, lions, but they basically fawned upon him, and they were not forced away, actually, until he had blessed them. So that didn't work either. He put him in a den of lions. Like, the lions can attack him, and so this is starting to get very, very serious. And there's another one of the part of the story goes that his soldiers, I think, when they try to behead him the first time or something, the sword broke or something like that, and they ended up believing. So that was one of the things. And then there was like the wheel The wheel was like a way of torture, where you connect the wheel to the ropes and just try to basically pull his body apart. And the ropes ended up snapping, and the wheel broke. And yeah, so I remember now. So when they beheaded him, the sword got bent, and so the executioners were converted to Christianity. And actually, he later became known as Saint Pantaleon. Yeah, Pantaleon, which means all merciful, all compassionate, because he actually had prayed after they tried to uh, execute him, or his executioners, or those who were ordered to torture him. He actually implored ahead of them, and so he ended up receiving the name Pantaleon. Yeah, that's it. And he didn't. It was not until then that he desired that if it was possible to behead him. Well, in other words, he basically got to a point where he prayed to God. He said, "Look, Lord," and at this point, there's no more you can do. He basically said, "Lord, if it is your will that I die, if it is for the greater good of Christianity, of your holy kingdom, then have them take my life. If you want me to continue being delivered, you've delivered many people in the past, then I'll be delivered." So at this point, after all he's been through, he's just basically seeking the glory of God. So God did permit him to be beheaded finally. And when he was beheaded, the story goes that not only blood was issued from his body, but a white liquid like milk. So I think that's a clear. I think we all can. I didn't get it at first right away, but I think it's very clear. When you have like a white milk, you're thinking sort of, I guess the medical aspect of things, or a sign of medicine, a sign of nourishment. When we're babes, we're just little sucklings, right? And our mother is supporting us, and I think that milk represents, that at the end of the day, we are all the children of God, and He is the main physician. He is the sustainer. He is the comforter. He's the healer. And so at the end of the day, he actually, I think there's like a vessel that they hold some of his blood in it. I think every year during his feast day, it's like a little vessel inside of a church, a glass vessel on like a wooden base or something like that. It actually exudes or milk, some white liquidy substance, milk and blood come a lot, basically appear in this vessel, and it happens
Where
once
is
a year.
where is that? You know?
Okay, so yeah. So at Ravello, a city in the kingdom of Naples, there is a vial of his blood, which
Mm.
becomes blood every year on his feast day and may be seen in this state, interspersed with the milk, as I, the author of this work, have seen it. So that's Saint Alphonsus. So Saint Alphonsus's works are credited, they are validated by many scholars, and he basically wrote everything he saw. He wasn't making up any of this stuff.
Yeah,
Uh,
but is it still there today? Do you know?
it is. It is. Yes, you can
Okay.
go to the city and in Naples, and you can see this vial of his blood. It's actually this very fancy looking. Like I saw it. It's this fancy looking glass container that's almost in the shape of a heart. And for the most part, throughout the year, it's just dry blood. So it's just this dry red sort of material. Material. Pardon me. And every year on his feast day, the blood appears and the milk appears at the same time.
Maybe
So
Stilgar can check it out. Like
yeah,
he has the I think Naples, that's part of Italy and it's still in the EU zone, so he can probably go there and check it.
yeah, yeah. I just would have to get yeah.
Take a picture,
I don't
Stilgar.
have
But
the church name, I guess, or where it is exactly. I think it's in. Trying to see where it is exactly, but I guess you can look it up. I mean, just type in like Saint Pantaleon's vial of blood in Ravello, like where you can find it. I guess it'll name you the church. Um, Let me see if I can pull that up. City of Ravello. Let's see real quick. in Naples. Okay. Vial of blood. Pantaleon. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's in a monastery or in a church or something like that. I'm sure.
Maybe they bring it out on a certain day every year for people to see.
Yeah, it's on his feast day. I'm trying to figure out when his feast day is, but it's at the Cathedral of Saint Pantaleon in Ravello, Italy. So it is in the cathedral. The feast day, I believe, is Thursday, July 27th. Or no, that might be the date of the article. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure when his feast day is.
We can put that in the slideshow later on when we render.
Yeah, we can include his feast day. I definitely would like to include that so people can actually it's a real event you can go to, and it happens once a year, and it's a very well known miracle in Italy.
Stilgar can go and check it out. He's
Yeah,
in a position like with the Schengen zone. He should be able to travel there.
certainly. So,
What
the
made you pick? What made you pick this saint? Out of
Saint
curiosity.
just yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering what made you pick this saint out of curiosity.
Oh, thank you for asking. Thank you so much for asking. So, I went to go to stay at a monastery for a couple months, sort of like as a pilgrim, like just wanted to stay at a monastery and try to gain some spiritual inspiration, so to speak. So I remember just being in my cell. I don't remember what I was. Um, I think I was reading scripture. I was reading a book about maybe the Holy Communion, I think, or the Holy Eucharist, or like it was like a book called The Divine Banquet. I actually have it right next to me. Actually, I was reading this book, and I was just talking about celebrating your wedding, how we celebrate a wedding with Christ. And one of the verses in the Bible says like he will not drink from the vine till after like the last day or something like that, but from now on people will be partaking of his body and blood. So I was thinking about the communion and how the Holy Communion is actually the main sustenance for a Christian. And I was just kind of thinking about that, and just thinking about also I was very interested since I was like 15 in psychiatry. I was very fascinated with all the different disorders and all the different medications and all the symptoms that get treated. And I was fascinated this my whole life. As a matter of fact, that was the first thing I wanted to be, was a psychiatrist. But I kind of gave it up at a certain point. And but I've always been fascinated by it. So I always, as a Christian, I always believed it was very important for people to treat their medical illnesses. Like it was just a fact. Like, just tell me you're going to go pray to God and you're going to even the communion. No, like there's still, if you still have some mental issues, you got to get it treated, because I clearly saw that this science was being backed up, and plenty of research was behind it. So I was constantly thinking about God and medicine kind of intertwined with the two constantly. This is always, my whole life has always been this way, and I always kind of separated the two. So I heard a small voice as I was reading this book, just a small voice, spiritual. I can't tell you from where exactly, but I just heard the word Pantaleon. And the word was so distinct. I mean, it wasn't something just like out of nowhere. I mean, I clearly heard it. It said Pantaleon. So I said, okay, wow, that sounds like some sort of a Greek name, Pantaleon, some sort of like victorious type saint kind of thing, like, you know, and because there's a lot of saints from the Roman era and from Greece and so on and so forth. So I looked it up. I looked up Saint Pantaleon. I started Googling him, and I found that he was in fact a physician who was very great in his practice and became a physician for the emperor, and later was able to kind of put the two and two together, like putting God and medicine becoming relevant to treating the illnesses for mankind. So I think this was sort of like a way to, I think it's for this very purpose. I really do feel I was, I really do feel I heard the saint's name so I can share his story with anybody and everybody. And I just thought that would be something cool to share on rediscovery, because I feel it's so applicable now to today's society. We're all about science. Part of the American culture, is just pop a pill for everything. We got to be the most, country in the world. America is always about, like, what can I do now? Fix it now. And just pop a pill for everything. And I think we've kind of gotten away from the original physician, which is Christ, the original hospital, which was the church. So I think society as a whole, to hear the story of this saint, I think it really reminds us as Christians that we kind of have to get back to that, right? We have to kind of get back to, look, healing is a real thing in the medical field, absolutely. But when we talk about souls, we talk about the salvation of souls, that's all the church. That's all the communion, that's all Christ, and it's the spirit, it's the soul is what we take with us afterward. There is a body that we take with us. The Bible talks about a glorified body, so on and so forth. I don't want to get into that, but we just have to understand that, yes, although psychiatry is very relevant, it's always been relevant, and medicine in our lives, we cannot forget the power that the church had, which it still does have, that people have to get back to that. And the Holy Communion, as Orthodox and Catholicism, this is sort of the belief that we hold, that Christ does nourish our souls. He does nourish our body, our flesh. We are taking the Lord's flesh. We are taking his blood. And so that was one of the things. So I thought his story was very fascinating, because he was the best of the best. Regardless of what education a doctor has, he had the best education. He was the physician for the emperor. And this man later claimed that, Christ was the true physician, that all these things came from God anyway, and that the church has always been that foundation. So I want people to know about the saint. I didn't know about him. He was born in 275 AD. He died at the age of 30. I believe he was 25, around 305. So he was 30 years old when he was martyred. So that's sort of how I came across his story, and it's very fascinating. I think it's very beautiful, and I think people just have to understand that these issues were going on in society way before our generation. This constant battle between science and God and science. It's been going on for centuries. So it's not going to change. But when we get away from it in society, when we get away from God in society, we have to go back to the stories of these saints. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
So I'd like to say something, and not to disagree with you, Great Pharaoh, but
Sure.
I don't think there's actually a battle between science and God. I would say that true science and the Bible will never contradict, but definitely there's a conflict between establishment, and establishment science and God, for sure. Because the purpose of any establishment is always to support those in power. And a lot of the worst persecution against Christians has come from those in power. So, yeah, but I would say, like, true science, like, that's arrived at through the scientific method, where you form a hypothesis, you conduct the observation and experimentation, you observe the experiment, and then if the results of the experiment match with your hypothesis, then you form a conclusion. You conclude, and it becomes a fact. But a lot of the stuff that's pushed, by the establishment, is not stuff that is arrived at by way of the scientific method. Like, like the official scientific position is the first life form, for example, spontaneously generated in a mud puddle like billions of years ago. And they don't like it when I say spontaneous generation. They're like, oh, don't say that, because spontaneous generation was officially debunked like in the 19th century. But they call it abiogenesis, but it's the same thing, right? And that's not something that's ever been observed. Like, everything that's been observed is that all life passes on more of it, like passes on the traits that it has, and comes from pre-existing life and creates more of itself. So I think it's important to just differentiate between science and narrative,
Yes, yes, I do agree with that. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And
Yeah, right.
I'm sorry. I did have a question that's kind of so eventually this guy wanted to die. I guess so I was wondering this whole time when they were trying to kill him, was he incarcerated
Want to die.
continuously?
He didn't want to die. He was asking. He was in a state of prayer, right? So like while all these miracles were happening to him, he was constantly in communication with the Lord. So at this point, he was basically saying, okay, God, like, it's not that he wants to die. He's asking God, he's saying, Lord, if it's for the better good of your kingdom, then allow them to take my life. If not, spare me, deliver me from this matter and set me free.
Was
So
he okay? So was he incarcerated the whole time while they were trying to kill him, or was it like they would try to kill him and then let him go and then come back later? Like how
well, it
that's
would have been I guess if anything, there were people who were delivered from persecution. They went through, I mean, the craziest things. I think they were delivered. I think they maybe escaped, or they were released, perhaps. Uh, you know, there is some of that happened. Sure.
was
So
he what I'm asking is, was he like they made multiple attempts to kill him, right? So
yeah,
during this
yes.
time, was he continuously like incarcerated, like, or did they let him go after any of these failed attempts?
Oh, no, no, no. He was still incarcerated. He
Yeah.
was he was he was incarcerated the whole time. And yeah, he's just in his cell, right? And he's just praying to God and asking, like, okay, if this is your will, like, I'll just go. Let them take my life. I mean, at that point, that's pretty much that's pretty much what happens. I mean, you always wonder what's going through the minds of these martyrs, so to speak. A lot of them sort of, the story goes that, like, God would tell them that this would happen to them, that they would essentially be martyrs, so they kind of knew what was coming. A lot of them were just constantly praying for the will of God. I mean, at that point, if you're already, your life is in God's hands, you're just going to continue doing that, right? And
Yeah.
so the one thing that you won't do, right, is give away your faith. Like, if you've already been shown the faith and you've grown in the faith, then for you wouldn't give it up even if they were to take your life, because that for you is spiritual death. At that point, you're giving up your spirit, your soul. And he was taught and he believed that the Lord was the physician of souls.
Yeah.
So you're not going to give away I'm not going to give away my spiritual physician. I'm not going to give away my physician of salvation, a physician of souls. I'll let you get away. I'll give up my work as a physician, and I'll do away with this science or whatnot. Or you could take my life, whatever you want to do, right? So that I think that was his mindset at the time.
Yeah, and
Right.
that's the correct mindset. Like I was reading in Hebrews the other day, like there's a very stern warning about like if you are like I don't remember, like I can't do an exact quote, but like if you have accepted God and you've known him and then you decide to go back to the old ways and the sin, then the only thing that you have to look forward to is like fearful judgment. And I was like, man, I read that to my son, and like I read him the Bible every night, but
Sure.
that
Sure.
kind of, because I've been thinking a lot of times, like, what would I do? I think
Sure.
eventually we're going to face, if it's not in
Sure.
our lifetimes, our descendants are probably going to have to face it. Where, like, I mean, it says in Revelations, at any rate, that the Antichrist will come. So people are
Sure.
going to have to face like death, or maybe torture. Like, and
Sure.
I've always wondered, like, what am I going to do in this situation? And when I think about it, I think I would rather just be killed, because I don't want to face the fearful judgment. Like, I would take the pain short term and just die, rather than I'd rather be on the bad side of man than on the bad side of God, basically. So
Rather than getting caught up in, giving up your faith, or
yeah, because
giving.
what good is it if you're just gonna be roasty toasty for all eternity.
Yeah, I mean,
May as well just die
the
quickly.
Bible says it multiple times. Whoever denies me before man, I will deny before my Father in heaven. I mean,
Yep.
that's one of the verses that we all heard of as Christians. You know, unless you take up your cross, you know, and follow me, you know, you can see about, you know, the verses about carrying your cross, so to speak. Like if you want to be saved, then, you know, carry your cross and follow me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake shall find it. And then there's other verses that talk about how, you know, God will never give more temptation than what they can handle. He gives everybody according to their own faith,
Yeah.
right? So he'll never give anything more than what you can handle, right? And so with that being said, you know, we all you know, we all have to face at some point some level of this, you know, whether we're being confronted by atheists or we're being confronted by, you know, I mean, now in society you have so many of this like Illuminati type culture crap in the music industry. I mean, that's a very rare thing, but you know, you have homosexuality, you have transgenders. They are challenging, they're not challenging stuff in science. They're actually challenging the word of God. I mean, you know, it's very clear. The Bible makes it very clear how all this stuff is an abomination. It's blasphemy towards God. And yet they're really fighting God. They're not really fighting, you know, really anything else, because all the people who we do not legitimize a lot of things for the LGBT community because it's not godly. It's just simply not. I mean, look at Sodom and Gomorrah. Look what all this that leads to. And you know, we have to at some point, we have to stand up for our faith. Now, in this particular case, it's not that bad. I mean, you know, for me, it's just an acknowledgement, right? Like I'm not going out having to defend myself in front of all these doctors and trying to tell them that, you know, Christ works better than this, you know, this Prozac here, this freaking, you know, Adderall XR and this and that. I'm not having to do that. But according to what I can handle, you know, the knowledge that I know about medicine, you know, I was very adamant about this. That in order for people to really solve their problems, they were going to have to come to the terms that they need to get medicated for whatever it was that they need to get medicated for. And I was always adamant about that my whole life. But sometimes people don't always have the resources to have medication. Sometimes they don't have the doctors to do it. Sometimes they're not aware. They're not in a position to even treat themselves because they're busy, you know, sacrificing their lives for others. So for me, I think God was basically trying to tell me, look, at the end of the day, these medicines come from the divine anyway. These doctors are doing their work and they're developing these medications. But at the end of the day, the Lord was the one who created the body. He created the flesh. He created the soul. So at the end of the day, if you don't have access to medicine or therapy or psychiatry, whatever, at the end of the day, you can always go to God if that's what it takes. But we have to remember that it's the church, it's Christ that are the primary healers. People are getting away from the church and they're being given many different medications now. There's so many medicines out there, and it's complicating things for people. You know, it wasn't like that back in the day, and in our generation, you know, we are over medicated. Americans are over medicated. I believe that, and we just have to really get back to the church and stop being magnetized to everything to do with medicine, and then not really understand the Eucharist. That is the medicine. That is life. And so, because he talked about it, he said, "He who does not eat my body, drink my flesh, who does not eat my flesh and drink my body has no communion with me." Like he, you know, now I know there are churches who don't literally have the Eucharist, and you know, look, I understand that the churches have different beliefs, but as Orthodox, that's the faith that we have to uphold. That's what we were taught. That's, you know, the scripture, and the traditions of the church that the body and blood of Christ is our main sustenance in everything. That you're talking medicine. You're talking about protection from chemical imbalances. You're treating chemical imbalances, but we don't know the other factors that goes into our health. God has to deliver us from a lot of situations. How many situations do people get mentally ill, not simply from chemical imbalance? It could just be their atmosphere. There's a lot of things that God delivers us from, and we just have to be aware of that and just realize that it is more important to take the body and blood of Christ at the end of the day than to take whatever medicine I need, to treat some disorder, so to speak. Now, there are obviously some conditions, like if you don't take this medicine, you're going to die, like your insulin, whatever, your diabetes. I mean, there's all sorts of different conditions where you have to take this medicine. And the church permits you to take that medicine even before communion, even though we're supposed to, fast before taking communion. No, the church allows that. That's
you
fine.
guys, hold up. You guys fast before you take the communion?
Yes, we fast. We don't eat or drink anything till we take the Eucharist, which is around 11 a.m. in the morning.
But you eat. So yeah, I'm sorry, because I'm like, you're telling me something that I don't think you told me before. But like, you eat Saturday night, but then on Sunday morning, like, you won't eat breakfast, right?
No, you won't eat or drink. And the whole reason for that is, and it's all related, it's just to prepare your body to receive the body and blood of Christ. Like, there shouldn't be anything in your stomach. There shouldn't be oils, food, any sort of that matter in your stomach. You need to empty and prepare it for Christ and to come in your body, because we consider it very holy, and that it's a sort of a sign too that that's the first and foremost for our souls, is the body and blood of Christ. So it also helps us. Obviously, the fasting helps us to get focused in the liturgy. When you're putting away the deeds of the flesh, your spirit is more in tune to worshiping God, to focusing for Eucharist, to understand the different meanings behind it, and to be ready to be united with Christ. It says in the scripture, the kingdom of heaven is not in food and drink, or it's not in word, it's in power. So we just need to have these ideas in mind. We just need to be thinking about these things and start practicing, at least to call on God more often than to call your doctor every single time.
I've been amazed at like how many people are ready to just take a pill for anything and everything. Like, take a pill for this, take a pill for that.
Yep.
And like, one thing I heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard this, that our drinking water in America is got a lot of contraceptive in it, because so many women are just taking contraceptives, and it gets into the sewage, and it gets into the even like when they filter out the water and send it back to our houses, it still doesn't get filtered out all the way. So like, whether we want it or not, we're getting, as guys, like, we're also getting some little dose of contraceptive. And like,
Wow.
people taking pills for headaches, people taking pills for depression. I say, if you're depressed, you should find out, like, the pill is not gonna get rid of your depression. It maybe will change the chemicals in your brain. So
yeah.
But just like when you take like something for physical pain, like,
Right.
whatever's causing that physical pain, maybe you don't feel it, but it's not going away. So you're better off to find out, like, what is actually happening, and deal with it, rather than just numb the pain. If you're in pain and you don't feel it, then there's a very good chance you're going to exacerbate whatever it is just by walking around and going about your business. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. Like, we're way too overdosed, over medicated, and especially with recent events. And I don't want to name anything specific, but quite honestly, you should not trust these people. Like, why would you trust them? But at any rate, Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of people, thousands of people die every year because they're addicted. So to
Yeah,
pay
addiction's
bills.
another major issue, and
sure.
people take these painkillers, and then instead of taking them to feel good, they take them to keep from feeling bad. I mean, I'm addicted to caffeine. Maybe I shouldn't talk too much, but
No, hey, look, everybody has their own addictions one way or another, right? But how do you treat all these addictions? I mean, if these addictions are just so broad, there's so many different kinds. Realistically, like, what doctor or you gonna go for every sort of addiction? Like, there's a pill for everything. Like, no, there's a lot of things going on with a lot of circumstances. There's a lot of maybe violence in the house, maybe certain situations or trauma you're not aware of. Could be worse from the enemy of good. Possibly, someone maybe your poor eating habits. I mean, at what point do we take responsibility and be like, I can't be overeating. I can't be eating bad food. I can't be sleeping only 4 hours a night and expect to, stay up at work 8 hours.
yeah,
It's just not.
it's another thing.
We
Yeah,
have to be. Yeah, we have to be reasonable with ourselves. It's not. You're not going to solve all the problems with the pill. It'll help you. It'll assist you. But who's the one doing the real healing at the end of the day? I mean, it's Christ. He's the one. He's the one doing the real healing. When you don't have any options, when you don't have anybody to go to, when you're just kind of down and out and you're giving up on all sorts of stuff, who then do you have to go to? So, that's the point that I'm trying to make is let's put more emphasis on Christ being the healer and the church being the hospital rather than the other way around for healing our mental disorders, psychological disorders, behavioral disorders, um, and that's it pretty much. That's all. That's it. That's all I
well,
got.
I think that's an awesome topic. There was something I wanted to say earlier, and then we can close it off. But like when
Sure.
you talked about like what the pagan doctors were doing during that time period, the methods they were using. So what I can say is, during that time period, the Aristotelian views had pretty much become the official mainstream establishment scientific, like the establishment science view throughout the Roman Empire. When we talked about that in some other videos with like the Ptolemaic cosmology and whatnot, but they basically they believed that the body was composed of humors, and they thought that there were only 5 elements, and the human body was composed of 4 of those elements in varying proportions. So like the 5 elements, there were just 5 atoms, and the 5 elements are wind, water, fire, earth, and then ether. And everything that's on earth is composed of those 4 of those elements in various combinations, and ether is only found in the heavens. So they would do things like bloodletting, and even like in the medieval period, like they were still kind of operating under these old Greek premises, and you'd see stuff like drilling into people's heads. I think it was called trepanning or something like that. I'm not sure, but starts with a T. But there's some pretty horrifying stuff, that was done as far as that goes. But yeah, that's what, like, their science was definitely operating under some false premises. Like they did definitely operating under some false premises. So
Sure.
yeah, it's kind of like hit and miss. Like the herbals, they would have herbal remedies and stuff, and sometimes that stuff would work and be helpful. But then they also had other horrifying things like bloodletting and drilling into your head and all this kind of stuff. And
Very frightening stuff.
yeah, very frightening stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
we have to be careful because history can repeat itself. We're here to talk about really applicable issues to society, because if we don't keep reminded of this stuff, we can go back to that. You'll start seeing really weird looking machines, and all it is just their newer versions of what they did centuries and centuries ago. But it's the same thing.
Well, I'll tell you what, like the baby boom generation, sometimes those people, when they would go and they get their tonsils out, like if they had tonsillitis, they'd also take out the appendix too. Sometimes they get like, you're here, might as well get the appendix out too, because the medical establishment in America had not yet determined what it was the appendix does. They thought it was an extra organ, and because they didn't know its function yet, and the reason they thought it was an extra organ is because they were operating under the idea of evolution, that the body was not designed with each part having its own purpose, but that we were evolved from, pond slime. And so some things may have had a purpose in the past, but over time that purpose fell out. So they were operating based on those premises. People were having, body parts removed, and it turns out the appendix actually does serve a function. I believe it's part of the lymphatic system, but under these false premises, they were removing it. And I think if people had a Christian worldview where they came at it from the position that the body was designed and each part of it serves a function, which the Bible also talks about, like, when it mentions the body of Christ, like everything has function. So then I think they wouldn't just remove something just because, like, we don't, it could get infected later, so we're going to remove it now. Like, that's, in my view, that's insane. That's crazy. And it's not that much smarter than, the medieval physicians trying to drill a hole in somebody's head to alleviate a headache. So,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess maybe okay. Well, I guess for Stilgar and Ivor Kovac, we can move on to the next topic, right, guys? So we kind of touched up on a saint story today, an individual, obviously a hero, and someone we can definitely recognize in this day and age. So if we want, we can just move on. I guess we can just move on to the next topic.
Alrighty. Yeah, let's close it off then. I'll see you guys in the next one.
Factus est natura mirante, unus renovatus est a Christo regnante. Gaudete, Christus est natus, ex Maria Virgine, gaudete.